it's the evening time, like you all might have been tired with the hustle and bustle of the day-to-day life, and then just taking out the time to be fruitful to you all. So tonight is the commencement of Debractor 4.0 Phase 1, that is DB training session. So Debractor has been continuing since many years, and like we got a certain like we tried to make a certain changes this time. So the phase one originally used to be a debate, so but then we tried to connect with the training session, and then the actual debate is going to take place in the next phase two. So we present to you the Debractor 4.0 phase 1, that is debate training session, that is the collaborative efforts of Rotaract Club of Alumni of University of Moratwa and Rotaract Club of Kathmandu. So welcome everyone. So now with immense excitement and like pleasure, I want to move ahead to with the session. So without any further ado, let's welcome our first trainer for today. So it's with immense pleasure and honor that I introduce to our very dynamic and talented trainer for the Debractor 4.0 Phase 1, that is the training session. That is none other than the extraordinary and talented Miss Alpha Maya Shakya. And Ms. Shakya stands as the epitome of excellence in the realms of public speaking, writing, research, and training. As a three times Toastmasters district champion, she has showcased her remarkable abilities on numerous prestigious platforms. That is, she reached the region quarters finals at Toastmasters International Speech Contest 2020. She also won the Toastmasters International Table Topics Contest, that is of 2023 in District 41, and Toastmasters International Evaluation Speech Contest 2022 of District 41. So Miss Alpha is also a social science researcher, proficient in ethnographic and qualitative research methodologies. Today, we are surely very blessed to have her share her wisdom and experience and knowledge with us. And I hope we all learn a lot from us. So now, without any like further ado, I would like to hand over the session to Miss Alpha Maya Shakya. Over to you.
Thank you so much for that wonderful and warm welcome, Pragya. I hope I'm audible. I hope I'm visible.
Yes, yes, you're audible
Great.
and visible.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here, and I would like to request our participants to turn on their video if they can, if their internet allows them to, so that, I can see everyone and it may not feel like I'm speaking just to my computer screen. So, like Pragya said, thank you so much for joining. I think Madhushika will be helping me share the slides due to some technical error on my side. So while she's pulling up the slides, I would like... Thank you so much. So the chat box is open, and let's keep this session as interactive as possible. You can, use the chat box. You can unmute yourself and you raise your hand, unmute yourself, and also speak. So this session is going to be about presentation and communication, basically. And the main focus of this session is going to be on nonverbal communication and also some considerations that will be helpful when you go out there on stage. So it's not too heavy on content about what kind of things you should present or talk in a debate, because I've been told that there's a special session for that. So this one will cover more about how to present yourself when you're on stage. Can we move to the next slide? The next one. Yes, thank you for joining me today, everyone. And yeah, Pragya has already introduced me. So I'm a writer, researcher, I'm a public speaker, and I've been a Toastmaster for the last 5 years. And I'm also a digital artist. So let's move ahead with the session. Yeah, so this is called How to Ace Stage Presence When Speaking in Public. So we'll be slightly more focused on how we can enhance our stage presence and get better at presenting. So let's go ahead. Yeah, we'll talk about nonverbal communication basically and what to do when you go up on stage and some other considerations at the end. We also have like a few exercises that might help you get some idea about what we're talking about. So we'll first start with voice. Now, what comes to your mind when you hear the word voice? Except for the 4 P's that are already mentioned in the slides. The chat box is open. You can also raise your hand and unmute yourself. What comes to your mind when you hear the word voice? Okay, okay. Ajay says sweet and loud. Okay. Anything else? How about others? Clear. Yeah. Smriti says impact. Praveen says clear. How about others? Tone. Okay, yeah. Words. Oh, confidence. How can voice show confidence? That's a very interesting mood. Yeah. So when you are low, we're like, oh, yeah, true. That's true. So voice is one of the non-verbal you know, parts of communication. So the verbal communication is basically written communication or the words, the actual words, and voice is more like how you say those words or how you pronounce those words or how you pause and how what kind of pace you're talking about. So it's basically how you are speaking in any setting. And one of the most common ways of looking at voice or learning about voice in giving a presentation or giving a speech is the four P's. They're called pace, pitch, pause, and power. And you can say that in any order that you'd like. So pace is basically the speed of your when you're speaking, the speed of your presentation. Now, everybody has different speeds and everybody has different paces. Some people speak very fast, some people do not speak that fast. And even in one same presentation or one same speech that you're giving, you can have pace variation. Some parts might be a little faster. Maybe you're trying to gain traction or trying to create suspense. Then you're like, oh, yeah, now this happens and then this happens. So you go a little faster. And sometimes you have to create maybe a mood or environment or get the audience to think, so your pace can be slightly slower. You can get relax them. So that's basically pace. And then there's pitch. So pitch is high pitch or low pitch. Anyone who wants to take a guess at what pitch might be? What do you think is pitch? We've all heard about singing pitches, I suppose. Loudness.
Sharpness, maybe.
Sorry, can you say that again, Anish?
Sharpness.
Sharpness. Yes, kind of sharpness, shrillness, the province is shrillness, intensity, not exactly intensity, but somewhere around, not loudness. So pitch is
Frequency.
basically, sorry, can you say that? I think it's
Frequency.
mirrored. Sorry?
Frequency.
Frequency. I would say frequency is probably pace because it's how fast we're speaking. Pitch is like, yes, okay. So that was, I guess that was a tech glitch just now. Pitch is like there's something called low pitch and there's something called high pitch. A great example of high pitch is when you're happy, you're at the top of your voice. And low is when you are like feeling sad or tired, when you don't want to speak. So those are different kinds of pitches. And then there is range in between. Now your speech can have high pitch. Maybe you want to raise intensity of the audience. Maybe you want to, get them really hyped up. So you'll probably have to have a high pitch. You're like, yes, everybody, listen to me, sort of. And then you might have to calm them down or take them in a relaxed mood. Where you are. Yeah, so maybe you're transitioning, maybe you're telling a story, and that might require you to lessen your pitch. So it's one way to play around with your voice. Now, pause. Everybody knows what pause is. Pause is when you pause is, that one of my favorite definitions of pause. There's a airplane passing by. I hope you can still hear me. One of my favorite definition of pause is it is the sound of silence. So when you pause, there's silence, and it adds more value to your speech. A good way to pause is before you make a transition. Maybe you are moving from point A to point B, or talking about two different points and it's time to move on to another. You can take a pause, then you can move ahead. You can also pause before revealing important information. So when you pause, it signals the audience that, hey, it's time to listen, to be careful. Something important is coming next. And pause also helps us, relax, because when we're speaking, if our speech is slightly longer, then pauses can also help us take a breather, and it can just, calm us down as well. Pause can also help us avoid filler words. So in case we don't know what we are going to say next, and we might be like, so instead of that, if we just pause, that can also help us. Finally, power. Somebody was saying loudness. So power is kind of not exactly loudness, but has something to do with loudness. Power is when you use energy in your voice to emphasize something or to draw focus on something. So when you say like, this has to be true, for example, so you put an energy in your voice and you sound more um, round or loud, or you emphasize that this is it. So maybe there's a debate going on about everybody should exercise, and the other party is saying no, everybody shouldn't exercise. So they give their reasons and they're like A, B, C. So power projects that this is an important part, we must listen to it, this has some value for our audience. So let's move ahead. So pitch, pace, power, pause helps us gives us a range in our voice. So your voice will have high pitches, low pitches, pauses, and sometimes you can be a little happier when you're speaking. Sometimes you might have to be serious. So voice has a range, just like when we're singing, there's different ranges, the different things that happens in a song. We can use our voice in similar ways when we are on stage. So express mood, express internal emotions, express need, or when you're like saying something with power, it means you care about it, so it also shows some sort of emotion. Can we move ahead? Yeah, so use vocal range, go high pitch, go low pitch, be loud, be a little soft when you need to, as demanded by the content that you're presenting. Now, throw is something that has to do with loudness as well. So throw of your voice is basically how loud or how audible you can be at the back. So a good idea and a good way to do that is to speak from your stomach. So do not speak from your throat, because if we start speaking from just our throat, what happens when we're giving a speech is we might run out of energy, or our throat might dry off. So it would be like we are screaming at some point in time. So stand tall and let the voice come from the stomach. That gives you more energy, and you may not get tired as quickly when compared to just speaking from your throat. Now, of course, voice is something that helps us emphasize on stuff. You pause somewhere, it's important. You use power and energy. People realize, oh, this is important. You have to listen to it. You use pitch to show emotions, and pace determines the mood or what kind of theme that you're moving into. If it's suspense, maybe it's faster, maybe it's relaxed, it goes a little slower. If it's like a pressing concern, you might have to raise your voice and give more power, like suppose and somebody's talking about climate change and they're like, the crisis is real and it's come at our doorstep. So using our voice, we can do a lot of different things to the words that we are delivering on stage. Yeah, let's move ahead. It's a big component of expressing emotions. I think this is something we do every day. When we're tired and bored and lazy, our voice becomes in one way. When we're angry, our voice sounds different. I don't know if you can guess it, but are you able to guess when people are angry just by listening to their voice? Yes, no? Yeah, I can see Mother Shika. Yeah, I can like kind of feel like my mother's getting angry when I hear her voice. Even when it's like she doesn't have like anything on her face. So yeah, voice is such an important aspect of showing emotions, and especially when you combine it with facial expressions, it becomes even more powerful. So before we move to the next component, do we have any confusions or questions or anything? Are we here? Yes? Are we on the same page? Yes, I can see a few thumbs up. Yeah, thumbs up are flying on my Google Meet. I think it's a great thing that my computer didn't work and Madhusika had to share the slides. Now I can actually see the reactions, or else I wouldn't be able to see the reactions. So yeah, that's the silver lining, I guess, of when sometimes tech just cracks up and you have to resort. Great. So we do have a Q&A. I do have some time for Q&A at the end. So if there's any question that pops up, please make a note of it and we can resolve it at the end of the session. So yeah, let's move ahead. Now, the second component of acing stage presence, as you might know, is of course body language. They say our body speaks, and that our body knows emotions and things that maybe we are not consciously aware about. Has it ever happened to you that maybe you were meaning to go to, let's say, location A, and you ended up at location B because location B was some place you used to go every day? Maybe when you switch jobs or switch schools. Has that happened to you? Yeah, I can see Madhusika nodding her head. How about others? And I was meaning to go here, but then my body took me to the other side. Has it happened to you? No? It's just Madhusika and me? Are we the only ones who have like landed up in a different place than what we imagined? Okay, yes. Okay, Diva says yes, and somebody else was laughing. So I guess it's not just us, but yeah. So that's because our body has muscle memory. So our bodies, like our muscles in our bodies also have their own memory, and that's how musicians actually use it to remember. You know, when you see pianists or guitarists or violinists playing instruments, they're not always remembering everything when they're like at a certain level. It's their body that has already internalized, you know, if I press this key, this is going to be this note. So their body just knows it automatically. And it's the same for us presenters. When we go up on stage, our body knows, and our body knows things that we might not be consciously aware about. So if we're nervous, our body can give it away. If we are lying, our body can give it away. There's actually this thing called, if someone is touching their eyebrows and the back of their ear, you know, and then touching like their face or something, they could be lying, you know, like trying to cover their mouth, because that's something that makes us uncomfortable and nervous. So our body kind of gives things away, and it's very important to be aware about how to take care of these subtle nuances that might impact our listeners and our audience members. So yeah, let's go ahead with what we have in body language. So the first point that we have in body language is hand gestures. Anybody has any thoughts on hand gestures? Have you ever used hand gestures? Of course, we always use hand gestures. We're always gesturing. We're always, you know, when you're like, oh yeah, I went there. Our hand just moves in coordination with how we are feeling or what we are saying. So hand gestures is how we move our hands when we're presenting. And there is a purposeful way of doing that. So when we say I, we probably, I don't know if you can see me, but when we say I, maybe you take your hand closer to yourself. So it's like hand gestures are going in parallel with the words that you are saying, and that reinforces the message that you're trying to give. And when we say yours, maybe you open your palms and show it to the audience. So hand gestures is something that people can see, and the words that we're speaking is something that people can hear. And if they go together, it's like a movie and its background score moving together, you know, like in metaphorical terms. So it's in sync. People understand us better. Usually when we're clasping our hands, the nonverbal signal or the unconscious signal is that we might be nervous, because, you know, when we're nervous, we're holding our hands and we don't know what to do with it. A good way to manage hand gestures is to plan it when you are preparing your speech. So if there are words that require hand gestures, like let's say huge, if the word called huge, then you can just open your hands up and be like, oh yeah, this is huge. So it gives a visual representation to the audience. So it's important to deliberately practice this so that eventually, slowly with time, these become ingrained in our memory and that it starts operating automatically. It might take some time to get there. And until then, we deliberately implant these gestures. I'm going to say this and this and this. I'm going to maybe open my hands when I'm going to welcome people, or it depends on the content that you're sharing. And we move next to posture and stance. That's how we stand on stage and how we present ourselves on stage. It's always advised to stand up straight with our chest open, our shoulders, and our, body weight on both of our legs, and standing tall so that we look confident and we also feel good about ourselves, because stance also shows confidence. Somebody was saying voice can show confidence, stance can definitely show confidence, and that can also be practiced. I think stance is also something that comes with the kind of clothes we wear sometimes. So maybe you could wear clothes that make you feel comfortable and make you feel confident at the same time. That can help you, open up. If you are wearing too tight of a clothes, then maybe the stance could be a little difficult for us to manage, or to move. Even our hands as well could also impact our hands. So do stay upright when you're speaking and feel like, feel confident. It has to come from the inside. Body weight on both of your legs so that you look tall and confident in front of the audience. Now, the next point is eye contact. How many of us here struggle with eye contact? Nobody struggles with eye contact. Wow, well, that's amazing. Are we sure we don't struggle with eye contact? Maybe, okay. Oh, sometimes, yes. And there's a haha as well. Okay, everything says me. Yeah. What is it about eye contact that makes you uncomfortable? I know it's intense, when we say eye contact and we have to look into somebody else's eyes. It's a bit intense, even in that sense. Is there anything particular? Oh, sometimes it's too powerful. I wonder what that means. Sometimes it's too powerful. Ajay, would you like to? Okay, Bhagya says people looking at us and being lost. Okay, yeah, I know. Eyes are like just like hands. Sometimes we don't know what to do with our hands. Sometimes we also don't know where to look. So that's when the eye contact gets a bit messy, because we're looking at people makes us scared. Absolutely, it's a very human reaction to have. Yeah, sometimes it's difficult to speak while you're also trying to maintain eye contact with people. You're nervous. There's probably like a ton of different emotions going inside of us. So the good thing with eye contact is you don't have to look at people's eyes directly, especially if you're on stage and if it's like a slightly bigger audience. If it's a small, cozy audience, maybe it's like 5 people, then yes, you would probably have to look at people on their face so that you can maintain that eye contact and that connection that we build with people. But when you're up on stage, it's not necessary that we look straight into people's eyes. That's not needed. You can look at their head, at the top of their head, and it will still look as if you're looking at them from the audience perspective. So that could make us a little less nervous instead of just looking at people. Now, it's also important to maintain eye contact with as many audiences as we can. So if a hall is huge, then it's advised we look at different sides, maybe to your left, maybe to your right, and maybe to your center. If it's a small audience, maybe 10 people, then you could probably reach out to everyone, 5 minutes speech, you could just maybe 30 seconds here and there. But if it's like a huge hall, then you could divide it into sections and then look at that side once, maybe to your left, maybe to your right, maybe to your center. One way to do this is using W. So move your eyes along a W. So make a big W where the audience is seated and move your eyes along that W. You could also make an infinity sign in your head and then move along that infinity sign so that the entire audience is covered and everybody feels like you have addressed them. It's also a good idea to switch eye contact after making a certain point or after finishing a sentence. So maybe you're looking at someone to your left and you are speaking a line like, I think pets can make me happy because they are adorable. So the sentence has finished, and then maybe move on to the next person instead of moving halfway through the same sentence to the other person. So that gives you a little time to connect with the person that you're speaking and then move on to the next when you have a different sentence or a different point to share. And the way to ace eye contact is, of course, to keep trying. Next is facial expressions. Now, facial expressions are how we use our face. If you're talking about happy things, yeah, have a smile. And sometimes when you smile, it doesn't require you say, I am happy. So facial expressions can help you reduce the words that you actually have to speak in like words. So you don't have to say you're happy if you're smiling. It's implied. People can figure out. And if you're sad, maybe become a little solemn with your face. If you're cracking a joke, you might need to laugh with the audience, or you might have to have a poker face depending on the content and the situation. So facial expressions is also quite important. If you're like raising suspicion, you might have to look a little suspicious. When you're raising a question, you might have to look a little confused and then resolve it with the audience. So facial expression combined with our voice can be a very powerful tool to use and show emotion and make people believe more deeply in what we are saying, because voice and face, they kind of go together. If somebody says I'm happy, but then their voice doesn't say that they're happy, their face doesn't say that they're happy, you'll probably not believe them. It's the same thing on stage. It's a conversation with the audience. So everything you would do with a friend, with your voice, with your face, being authentic, all of that comes on the stage in a similar manner. Now, finally, in body language, I've also included something called stage movement. So stage movement is how you go around the stage, depending on how big the stage is. It's a good idea to cover different parts of the stage, and you can also use it to choreograph your speech or the idea that you're generating. So do ensure you move to the left, you move to the right, so that the audiences at the right side, audiences at the left side can also see you. And it's a good idea to move when you're changing points, like point A and then point B. So it's also, stage movement can also be a way of transitioning from one idea to another and add a little bit of pause there, and that helps people understand that, okay, it's time to move on to a new point. Can we go back? Yeah. Usually when there's something of a flashback or going back in time, you can actually literally go back or behind in the stage. So if you're at the front and you're talking about, let's go back in time, so you can go slightly behind, just to give the audience a feel that we're moving back in time. It's a good idea to be at the center stage when you are delivering a key point or like something important that you want everybody to listen. You can step one step forward from where you are and then take a pause and then speak. That adds a little bit of more intensity, a little bit of curiosity, and it kind of signals the audience that it's time to listen because something important is going to come. Stage movement depends a lot on the type of content that you're presenting, what are the themes. So do think how you can use the stage in a way that can be helpful and that can enhance your ideas that you are sharing. It's a good idea to not show your back to the audience unless it is required by the presentation or the speech. Suppose if you have to show the back for some specific reason, if it has a purpose, then yeah, please go ahead. Maybe it would be needed. But apart from that, it's a good idea not to show your back. And even when you are like moving, It's good to be just tilted sideways so that sometimes you're having a conversation with the imaginary character that you've created. So it's good to just slightly tilt yourself so that you're still visible from the audience to your right, audience to your left, and of course the audience to your front, and that your back is not visible. It is said that showing our back to the audience is a little being disrespectful of the audience unless it is required, unless it actually adds some value. There might be cases where you might have to show your back, you might have to turn around, and there might be reasons to do that. So if there are reasons, then yeah, maybe you could try with that. Now I have small exercises that I would invite you to join me. It's a vocal exercise basically about pitch, pace, pause, and emphasizing and using power. So would anybody would like to read this sentence out loud for us? How would they say? Because emphasizing on different words can sometimes create different meaning, and it can show us that which is the most important part in this sentence. Does anybody want to try? Does anybody want to try this tiger sentence? No? Nobody wants to try the tiger sentence? Did I hear someone? I think somebody unmuted themselves, but I'm not sure. So nobody wants to try this exercise? Nobody likes tigers, I guess.
I'm gonna do that.
Okay, Pragya's gonna do that. Yeah, please. This is kind of like a vocal exercise, so yeah, let's see.
Okay, I just have to read out, right?
Yeah, so you can use pitch, you can use emphasis and pause and power to create different feels in a single sentence.
Okay, I'll try. I'm not sure if I'm good at it. So,
No.
we saw a tiger in the room. We saw a tiger in the room.
Yeah. You want to try one more? One more time?
We saw a tiger in the room. We saw a tiger in the room.
Yeah. So when Pragya was like, we saw a tiger in the room, it feels like the tiger is in the room and we have to now run from the room before the tiger eats us or injures us. We can also say we saw a tiger in the room. So the tiger was not supposed to be in the room. Maybe it was supposed to be in the cage. Maybe we're at a zoo, So, but I think my favorite was when Pragya was like, we saw a tiger in the room. Yeah. So you can use emotions and pitch to create emotion and sensation. So we have one more. Can we go next? Yeah. So we have one more. Anybody wants to try? This one is... This one is a little creepy. I don't know. Maybe it's a little creepy. Anybody wants to give this a try?
Yeah, I'll do that.
Okay, we have Pravin. Yeah. So yeah, let's have 3-4 iterations and listen how it feels.
Okay. We ran at the first sight of the strange object moving towards us. Okay, the next one. We ran at the first sight of the strange object moving towards us. Okay, that's it. I think I know.
Okay, that's it. Okay, great.
That's how my tone.
No, that's fine. Not all sentences will be, will have the same kind of range. So when Pravin was saying we ran at the first sight of the strange object moving towards us, it's like there's this creepy thing that's happening or about to happen, and we are running. So it could signal danger, it could signal fright, or if you can just strange object, like. If you just say that, if you focus on strange object, you're like, okay, what is this object? So the audience might be like, what is this object? This seems important because the speaker has emphasized on it. So maybe the speaker will reveal it by the end of the speech. So it kind of gets people curious. So that brings us to the end of the voice and body language part. I'll now share some other tips and consideration, and maybe we can open the floor for Q&A, quick Q&A, maybe one or two. And so these are some other tips beyond the voice and beyond body language, something that might help you present yourself better on stage, something that I try myself as well. So let's go ahead. This is one of my favorites. Try to be in the zone. I think the zone can mean anything, and it means different things to different people and different speakers and presenters. But for me, being in the zone means, I get really hyped up and I feel like, okay, I have to present now. It's going to be my turn. And that sometimes gives me a strange kind of energy that I might not have otherwise. So you're nervous before you go on stage, and I think that can help you get into the zone sometimes. And sometimes you can visualize, you imagine your audience, you imagine yourself on the stage, and that can give you energy, that can make you feel like you are ready to go out there, and it can help you enhance your level of presentation by adding that power that might not be there when you're practicing sometimes. So getting into the zone, you're like, now I'm going to present. So, I need to do something amazing. So just trying to get into the zone. And visualization helps to get into the zone. Meditation can also help. So different things work for different people. I sometimes visualize. I sometimes also meditate to get a laser focus. This is what I'm going to say. Breathing exercises definitely help you calm down and make you less nervous, because the first few seconds before you go on stage can be really nerve-wracking, and it can be like I sometimes when I get scared, I'm always thinking, oh no, why did I agree to do this presentation, or why did I agree to do this speech? So the first 5 seconds before I go on stage, I'm like, why did I agree to be here? So it's okay to be nervous. It's absolutely fine, but can you use it to get into the zone? Now, the next tip is also similar. When you get nervous, you have energy. There's a lot of things that's happening in your body, and you can channelize that energy into giving you power and presence. So the nervous energy can be used to make you feel like you're in the moment, in the zone, and then it can give you a stage presence that you might not otherwise have. You're nervous means it's actually a good thing. It means you care about the audience. It means you care about what you're going to say, and that is why you are nervous. So if you're nervous, it's absolutely okay. Everybody gets nervous. It's the way how they manage it. Some of us can better manage it, and all of us will be able to better manage it with time and practice. The final tip that has to do other than the voice and body language we talked about is to prepare as much as you can. I think that's the only thing we have in control. When we go up on stage and then we have delivered our presentation, it's over. Now we can't change it because we can't go back in time. But we can always prepare beforehand as much as we can. We can practice, we can research, and preparing also makes us feel confident because we realize that we've tried. We've put in the effort that is needed. So that makes us feel like we are worth it. It's worth being on the stage. Sometimes when we do not prepare as much, we can get nervous because we already feel like, oh, I haven't prepared enough, so maybe I'll forget or maybe I'll fumble. So we might still fumble even if we prepare, but that is not something we can always control. But preparing beforehand is something that we have so much more control in, as compared to what happens on stage on that day. So those were the three extra tips and considerations. Now, do we have time for Q&A, Pragya? If we do not, it's absolutely fine. If we do, we could have maybe a few questions.
Maybe we can take one or two questions.
Okay, so let's take 2 questions then from the audience.
Uh, if it's so, hi, I mean, such a wonderful session it was. Uh, my question, I think many of the participants might can resonate with this, is that we're having this online debate, Alpha, and it's next week happening. So most of the thing which you mentioned was like some of them could be applied in online or physical both context. But I just wanted to know if there are any specific suggestion for our participants, that they could keep in mind when they are debating next Saturday. So that was one thing that was coming in my head. Yeah, thank you.
Great. Thank you so much for that question. For an online setting, it is very important that your voice is audible. So please have good audio devices, whatever you can, and that you're audible, and that you're audible throughout the speech. Sometimes what happens when we are talking virtually is sometimes the computer picks up our voice, sometimes it doesn't, depending on the. Sometimes we move ahead, it maybe picks up our voice. We move backward, it may not pick our voice as clearly as before. So having some audio device, maybe a mic, maybe a Bluetooth mic, whatever works. Maybe your computer has good mics already, so whatever works for you for voice clarity, because that's very important. The other one, hand gestures would be same, using our voice emotions would be same. I think something different that would be is eye contact. Now, eye contact with the stage, you could use W or infinity, look at everyone. In online, you have to look at your own camera, and that can feel a bit weird, I understand, because even I'm looking at the camera and it feels a bit weird because there's no people in front of it and you can't see anyone. You're just maybe a green dot that has lit up. It does get better with practice. So you look at the camera, and the audience who are on the other side, it will feel like you are looking at them, and imagine the audience in your head. Imagine your friend is at the back listening to you. I hope that is also, yeah, please have your screen arrangement. Please test how much of your body you would like visible. If you're going to stand, it's good to have your torso visible and to have your hands clearly visible so that you can do the gestures. You can still move around the stage, depends on how much your camera coverage will allow. You can move to the left, you can move to the right, you can move back, you can move front. It's the same like on a real stage. It might be a little smaller, and you might not be able to move so much, but you can still use the concept depending on how much screen, how much your computer can capture, and how much you can move around. I hope that was helpful. Do we have one more question? Let's take one more question, and then do we have time, Pragya?
Yes, we do have time for one more question. So maybe we can take question of Praveen, who was raising the hand.
Great.
Praveen, you can unmute and just like shoot the question.
Okay, now while speaking, I do have a problem. Like when I complete one sentence and like with one flow, and when I want to transition to the next sentence, then my voice just breaks in the middle, and it feels like and I take breath, and little portion of that next sentence just gets away with that breath, and it feels that the later sentence is incomplete. So how do I deal with that problem that my voice just breaks in the middle?
So you mean when you move from one sentence to another sentence,
Yeah, yeah, and
the
yeah,
first part of the second sentence is not as audible.
yeah, because like when I just go with the particular flow for the first sentence, and if I have to transition to or to a different tone or different pitch in the next sentence, then in the gap in the middle, my voice just breaks over there again, like it's like a gap, and that gap often makes me feel oh, I think I just messed it up.
Can I ask you how okay would it be if you could give us a demo?
Okay, I'll just do
Would that
that
be
one.
possible? If you're comfortable.
It's like actually I don't have sentence right now, but like it's voice breaker. Like suppose you have two sentences, and then you're just going with flow in the first sentence, and you have to go to the next sentence. Then in the gap, you have little voice breaker, like where you are just what to say? I will, like you take breath over in that particular phase, and your voice just breaks over there. And I feel that to me, I feel that problem with me.
Okay. Can you let us know what you mean by your voice breaks? Does it mean you are not as audible?
No, not audible, but it's like okay, how do I explain? I have faced it. It's like in the first sentence, in the first sentence, you go with a particular flow. Suppose you have
Yeah.
you have like theme that you have a sentence that expresses extreme joy, and
Yeah.
the later sentence, I think it is not as happy as the previous one. Then when you
Mm.
have to transition that particular tone or of your voice, then there's a little voice break in the middle. Okay, you cannot just quickly shift that tone, and that happens to me.
Ah, okay. So it's like polar opposites.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like,
like
oh
that.
yeah, I'm feeling so happy, and suddenly I'm feeling sad. Something like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, Maybe it could help if you would arrange your content in such a way that it allows you some time to transition. So have
Like,
some buffer.
is it okay if I take a gap between two those different no different theme of sentence, or like should I go with the particular flow only or with the better practice?
You can pause. I think pause also denotes transition. So you could, of course, you could pause. That could be one way. Or because I cannot envision an exact situation, and that was the reason I was trying to ask you so that we could, find a demonstration. If there's one extreme emotion, like happy and sad, like you said, and you move from happy to sad, maybe allow yourself design your content, your speech in such a way that you have some time or some way to transition to the like sad to happy or happy to sad, so that you can build your flow accordingly. Does that make sense?
Okay, I'll try it out.
Sure.
I'll try it on that.
Yeah, you can pause. Like,
Okay.
always, pause is a good way to transition, or you can just move as well. Pause and maybe take a step to your left or to your right. That also shifts the audience's perspective that, okay, something is going to change because you've moved.
Okay. Okay.
That
I'll
could
do
be,
that. Thank you.
you could try that. Yeah. Great. So, yeah, that brings us to the end of the session. And thank you so much for having me. I hope it was helpful. And we can get connected on LinkedIn. I also have a blog called The Word Castle. You can also find me on Instagram, and you can also connect with me via email if you'd like to, get connected. Thank you so much for having me in this session. I hope you had a good time and all the very best for your debate. I'm sure each one of you who are participating will do it really well, and I hope you have fun. Most importantly, being going up on stage and sharing your ideas is can be scary, but it's also such a wonderful thing to share your ideas with the world. And I hope you make the best of it. Thank you so much for having me. Back to you, Pragya.
Thank you so much, Alpha, for such a fun and like amazing and insightful session. So, what I really liked about your session was how you kept like how you comforted us, saying that whatever things we are facing on with like our problems with like eye contact, body language, voice, that was all normal, that normal like human reaction. But like you proceeded to go towards the tip centric. So I feel like that kind of made the environment comfortable as well. So thank you so much for such an amazing session, and like thank you so much. Thank you for joining in today. It was really great to have you today with us. So now we have like the baseline set for the presentation and how to deliver the voice, the body contact, and like preparation tips and tricks. So now we're going to move ahead with another trainer who is going to dive deeper into the debate. So it's with immense pleasure and honor that I introduce our very dynamic and talented trainer for the Debractor 4.0 Phase 1 debate training session. And so just to give you the picture of who he is. So, like, picture a guiding force behind success stories of like numerous debaters, someone who's like mentorship and like leadership have transformed the landscape of like numerous debaters. Like, imagine a mentor whose leadership not only pushes the debaters towards the victory, but also instills a confidence in the debaters to actually articulate their thoughts in the very clear and like concise manner. So now it's the time to reveal the amazing debate trainer for today. So He's none other than Mr. Gavin Senaratna. And so Mr. Gavin is the head coach of English debating at Royal College, Colombo, Sri Lanka, and former coach of English debating at Dharmaraja College, Sri Lanka. So let's welcome Mr. Gavin Senaratna today with us. So without any further ado, I would like to hand over the session to Mr. Gavin. So over to you.
Thank you, Pragya, for that very flattering introduction. Can I just confirm whether I can be seen and heard?
Yes, you're both audible and visible.
Okay, lovely. And I hope everyone can see my presentation.
Yes, it's visible.
Okay, great. Um, so let's just dive right into the presentation. It's titled Debating Fundamentals because I'm not a creative person. I'll be going through what you need to know about debating. I'm assuming that everyone here is new to debating. So I'll be going over the basics and the things that you need to focus on in a debate of this nature. So first of all, I'll just give you an overview of what I'll be covering. Preparation is one of the main parts of such a debate because this is a prepared motion. And everyone has a week or two, or I don't know how long, to research this motion and understand the background behind it and understand the situation surrounding artificial intelligence and creativity and all of that. So really, this debate could be won or lost in the preparation stage alone. If one team outpreps the other, they are most likely to win. So there are a few aspects of preparation. I'll be going through these one by one. And secondly, I'll be dealing with the things that you need to focus on with regards to the debate. Obviously, I won't be talking about public speaking and the rules of presentation in general because Alpha covered that in great detail. And anyway, in debating, especially in the international level, so to speak, in the WUDC or the WSDC standard, the emphasis on presentation is much lower than the emphasis that is placed on your analysis and your logic. So if you are able to prove more convincing material or provide more convincing arguments than the other side, that will most likely win you the debate. And that's what I'll be focusing on as a debater. Okay, let's move on to the first segment of it, which is regarding preparation. The first part under preparation is definitions. Okay, so I say that there can be no debate without definitions because you need to define the key terms in any motion to make sure that there is something that both teams can agree on. Unless both teams agree on a set of standards or a set of parameters within the debate, what you're going to have is a silly argument where you just disagree on every single thing. And most of the time, it's going to be a disagreement on the definitions of the motion itself. I'll give you an example of this motion itself. If you take the motion, is artificial intelligence a threat to creativity? I thought about it for a while, and I found that there's at least three ways that you can interpret a threat to creativity. One, you can interpret it as a threat to the artistic industry, to the creative arts in itself. Two, you can interpret it as a threat to human creativity, as in to say that artificial intelligence will make humans less creative in the long run. Or three, you could say that it is a threat to the demand for creativity, which is that people as consumers will stop seeking creative things and move towards these mass-produced AI-generated art instead. And those are three possible interpretations of the phrase threat to creativity. So it's very important for both sides to try and understand and define the motion and move forward from that point onwards. Because unless you agree on the definition, you cannot have a debate. I'll give you an example of one debate that I myself participated in. The motion was this house believes that we should not consume the art of controversial figures. And one of the key points in this debate was what exactly counts as a controversial figure. And because of the disagreement that both sides had regarding what the definition of a controversial figure was, it was impossible to actually deal with the key issues in the debate. And rather, for all 6 speeches in the debate, we were focused just on what exactly is a controversial figure. So that's one of the key aspects of a debate. Without a definition, you cannot have a debate. So obviously, your first step during preparation, before you do any research, before you do anything, is to identify what are the key terms in this motion and then define them. Make sure that you're so familiar with your definition that if someone asks you about it, you can just give them an answer without thinking. After you sort out your definition, you need to construct arguments, or as they are formally known, substantives. Okay, so what exactly is a substantive? A substantive is basically a set of ideas grouped under one common theme. And the reason that you group ideas under common themes is because during the preparation stage, you will get, well, hope if you're lucky, hundreds of ideas. And you will want to express all these ideas at the debate as well. But if you just keep on rattling these ideas, it's very hard for the judge or the audience or anyone else to keep track of them. So the reason you have substantives is to put all these ideas under one umbrella and make sure that everyone understands them. And there's some logical sense to your speech. It gives your speech structure and a sense of clarity. I'll be using a few classic examples of debates throughout the session. So one classic example that we can use is, for example, this house would enforce the death penalty. It's one of the most famous debates that we've had. It's a common debate in many governments across the world. So with regards to death penalty, one of the key ideas is that the death penalty is something scary, right? It's irreversible. And therefore, people will be afraid of it, and therefore they won't commit crime. And this idea is broadly considered to be the idea of deterrence. Deterrence means you deter someone, as in you discourage someone from doing something. So all ideas that you have with regards to scaring criminals away from crime will come under that umbrella argument of deterrence. Then another idea that you can have is the idea of a suitable punishment. So for example, imprisonment is something that you give for tax evasion or things like fraud or things like stealing. Whereas the death penalty is something that you reserve for more heinous crimes like murder. So you could argue that, well, the death penalty is needed as a punishment in order to reflect the magnitude of these heinous crimes like murder. Because otherwise you would be giving a thief and a murderer the same punishment. So it doesn't really make sense. And there's no real distinction between, like, say, 20 years in prison or 30 years in prison. So now you have two ideas, one idea of deterrence and one idea of punishment. Now imagine if you just expressed all these ideas in one speech without showing a difference between the two. That would be very confusing for your audience. But if you group them under these two ideas of deterrence and proportional punishment, then it becomes much clearer, and your argument and your speech makes more sense as a whole. Now, even though I explained to you what substantive is, you still don't know how to make one. So every substantive has three main sections: the idea, the analysis, and examples. So what is the idea? The idea is the fundamental thought behind the substantive. So in the previous example, the argument of deterrence, your idea is that something is needed to scare people away from crime. That is the fundamental idea. And that is the basis of your substantive. Next, you have the analysis. Analysis means the logical steps that show how a severe punishment will deter people from committing crimes. So you need to say, well, usually people think that they can get away with a crime. And even if they do get caught, they think, well, it's just a prison sentence. I can appeal it. I can, do community service. I can be on good behavior and get out early. So it might as well be worth it to go out there and commit murder. However, the death penalty is irreversible. So now this person is scared and they won't go and commit murder. So that kind of logical linking of ideas together is called analysis. And the third idea and the third aspect of a substantive is your examples. For example, you can say, okay, Albania implemented the death penalty at some point, and since that point, we have seen a decrease in the amount of violent crimes. So that's an example that proves the idea that you had at the very beginning. So these are the three main sections of a substantive, and those are the three levels of priority. So the most important level is your idea, the second most important level is your analysis, the third most important level is your examples. But Simply because you know how to construct substantive, that does not mean that you will be able to generate a substantive. And that's where brainstorming comes in. Brainstorming is essentially the process of coming up with ideas to use in your substantives. So again, I mentioned the main level in a substantive is your idea, and the process of generating ideas is brainstorming. Typically, there are three techniques that you use for brainstorming in a debate. Obviously, there are other ways to come up with ideas, but if I had to give you guidelines and say follow these steps, these are things that I would give you. So the first thing is context, and context basically means what's happening in the world right now. If you take the motion that you have on whether AI is a threat to creativity or not, you should be looking at the advancements that we are seeing in AI right now. How is AI disrupting the creative industry? Have there been any loss of jobs? Have there been have there been any protests? Is there any kind of new software being developed in this region? And by exploring the context, you can understand the issues surrounding the topic of your debate, and that will help you generate new ideas for your arguments. The second aspect that you can use in brainstorming is stakeholders. So I'm sure many of you are familiar with this term, but in debating, we define a stakeholder as anyone who is affected by the motion. So in this case, again, anyone who is affected by AI or anyone involved who you think is involved in creativity to a large extent would be a stakeholder in this motion. And what you do is you identify the stakeholders and then identify the impact of this debate on those individual stakeholders. And that helps you come up with ideas. And then again, you can analyze those ideas and you can find examples and so on and so forth. The third part of brainstorming is principles. So the first thing that I mentioned about the death penalty, the idea of deterrence is a principle that the government needs to do something to deter criminals. That is a principled idea that is related to the obligations of government. In the same way, you need to think about people's basic rights or like morals, questions of what is right and wrong. Those are the things that come under principles. And typically in a debate, we tend to discuss these philosophical ideas to a large extent. So it would help you to look at certain principles as well during your brainstorming process. All right. Now, regarding the brainstorming process, this is just something that I want to cover because it's a mistake that I see a lot in debates, and especially among people who are new to debating, which is that if you find some interesting facts or statistics, do not base your entire argument or the entire case that you want to present in your debate upon those facts. The purpose of an example is to support your argument and basically to provide evidence for the idea and analysis that you have come up with on your own. Often I see people saying, okay, Amnesty International thinks that this is a problem, and then they leave the entire argument at that without analyzing it any further. Basically, they don't add anything new or any original thoughts of their own to the debate. And that essentially goes against the spirit of debating, because that's not really what you're supposed to do. Another issue, and this is just connected to the idea of using facts and leaving it at that, is this is a common logical fallacy, which is the appeal to authority. Just because someone important or someone of high status or someone who has a lot of money said something, that does not mean that that person is right. So for example, you could say the WHO said this, the UN said this, and all of that, but the WHO and the UN have had a long history of being wrong. So that saying that someone discovered something doesn't necessarily make it a good argument. It doesn't necessarily make it believable. The way that you convince someone in a debate is through your own analysis and is through presenting your own original ideas. And if you cannot, present your own original ideas, again, like try to come up with some kind of analysis, try to come up with some kind of standard arguments or whatever, but don't just resort to giving us facts, because that doesn't really help anyone. If I wanted the facts, I could have done a Google search. That's not the purpose of a debate. And that's about it for the preparation stage of things. So we'll move on into debating and actually speaking. So first, I wanted to address the idea of speaker roles. Now, typically in a debate, um, in the Asian parliamentary style, you have 3 speakers per team. In the British parliamentary style, you have 2 speakers per team. I was told that there are 5 speakers per team in this debating, in this debate that's been organized. So I tried to adapt the speaker roles based on that. Okay, so the first speaker has one of the most important jobs, that is to set up the debate. The way the first speakers, as in the opposition first speaker and the proposition's first speaker, set up the debate decides the course of the debate from there onwards. It decides whether you will have a productive discussion or it decides whether you just have an argument that doesn't really help anyone. There are a few responsibilities of a first speaker. In proposition, the government first speaker needs to provide definitions and define the motion, and both first speakers need to provide context. Again, I mentioned context earlier with regards to brainstorming, but you need to tell the judge and the audience what's going on in the world right now. You need to paint a picture for them to show them why this motion is relevant and why your arguments make sense given the situation that we have right now. From there onwards, typically the first speaker is expected to have 2 substantives. And usually in a debate, in the Asian parliamentary style, you expect a side to have 3 substantives, and in the British parliamentary style, you expect a side to have 4 substantives. So I figured 4 substantives or 5 should be enough in this scenario because you have 5 speakers. And typically the first speaker is supposed to focus mostly on substantives, and that's why you have 2 substantives in the first speaker's speech. Next, we move on to the second speaker. And here, again, substantives I've already dealt with that. Responding makes sense. Anyone can understand what that means, but I'll be covering that in depth later. But the third idea that I wanted to address is rebuilding. And rebuilding essentially means dealing with the other side's responses to your own material. So when you bring up an argument, the other side isn't just going to ignore it and they're not just going to accept it, right? They are going to respond to it in some fashion. So the second speaker has a duty, and this is usually the proposition second speaker rebuilds after the opposition first speaker's responses, and the opposition second speaker rebuilds after the proposition second speaker's responses. What you have to do is you have to defend your own arguments against the responses that have been brought in from the other side. And the reason I'm especially mentioning this is because it's something that's often neglected by debaters as well in the early stages. As in, they can deliver their substantives well, they respond to the other side's substantives, but they forget to respond to the other side's responses, and they just let those stand. And strategically, this is not a good thing, because if you're not defending your own arguments, it's not going to be a productive discussion, right? It's you just bring up new ideas and attacking those new ideas without lengthening the discussion on the very first ideas that you brought up. And that really limits the debate. And that's why rebuilding is so important. Next up, we have the third and fourth speeches. So the distinction between the second, third, and fourth speeches is that as the debate progresses, you focus more on responding and rebuilding and less on substantives. So the most important substantives need to come in the first and second speaker's speeches. And the less important ones, like these fancy philosophical ideas or whatever, come in third and fourth speakers' substantives. And the reason for that is you want to have your most important arguments at the beginning so that they can be discussed to a greater extent. And you want to have the less important ones towards the end because, you know, they might give you a slight edge in the debate, but it's really not so important that they get discussed to a large extent. And finally, we have the fifth speaker, who basically does the job of a third speaker in the Asian parliamentary style, which is to respond completely to the other side and basically summarize the debate and show conclusively why exactly your side won. So the fifth speaker actually has a large role to play because you're the final speaker for your side. And so the way you end the debate has like a lasting impact in the judge's mind, as opposed to like second, third, and fourth speeches. The first speech is also important because that's your first impression, and the last speech is important because it's your conclusion. So ideally, you'd want to make sure that you have a powerful opening and powerful ending in order to convince the judge. Now, this brings me to the idea of responses. Typically, the way you do a response is you target a certain aspect of the other side's substantive. And I've drawn this as a pyramid to show the importance of each aspect of it. So the first thing that we need to cover is rhetoric. Now, rhetoric isn't really all that important in a debate, in the sense that rhetoric won't win you a debate. Rhetoric basically means the stylistic cues that you use when you're speaking. For example, a common joke that we use in debating is when someone yells, but think about the children, and tries to appeal to your emotions in the process of making an argument. You see, saying think about the children doesn't really convince anyone of anything. It's not a solution for anything either. And it's not a particularly compelling argument. But if you ignore it and if you let the other side use rhetoric continuously, then the judge might be emotionally swayed towards their side. So it's important for you as a debater to point out that the other side is using rhetoric and tell the judge, look, you shouldn't listen to them. They don't actually have a case. They're just telling you to think about the children, but anyone can think about the children. We are actually doing something to save the children. And that's basically how you go about dealing with rhetoric. Just because it's not important and not powerful doesn't mean you should ignore it. The second thing that you need to respond to is the examples that the other side uses. The reason I put examples as the second level in this is because examples are very easy to deal with. One, you can question the reliability of an example, and two, you can bring up a counter example to disprove the other side's example. I'll give you one instance of this. So a common argument for gun control and making sure that civilians cannot own guns is to bring up the example of Australia, where in the 90s they passed a bill that made it very, very difficult to own a gun. And since then, their crime rates dropped considerably. On the other hand, I would respond to that by giving a counter example by saying there is a city, I don't remember the name, but it's in the American state of Georgia, where it is legally required for every citizen to own a gun. And in that city, the crime rate is zero. As in, there are no crimes committed in that city. No crimes have been committed since that law requiring everyone to own a gun was passed. So now you have two conflicting examples. In Australia, you banned guns and now there's no crime. But in the USA, you made everyone own guns and now there's no crime there either. So obviously, what these examples go to show is that a single example is not convincing on its own. The next idea, the next aspect of a response is to deal with the analysis. The idea that I mentioned earlier about showing the logical links between ideas within a substantive. And you can deal with analysis by saying, oh, look, this analysis is wrong, this analysis doesn't make sense, this analysis is not logical, and so on and so forth. The final class of response is directly dealing with their ideas. So if you go back to the example that I told you about the death penalty, if you take the idea of deterrence, that the government needs to do something to scare people away from committing crimes, you can respond to this idea by saying the government does not need to do anything to deter people from committing crimes because no one thinks that they'll get caught in the first place. So essentially, having a death penalty would be useless because no criminal committing a heinous crime actually thinks that they're going to get caught and executed. So that's how you dispute the very fundamental idea of an argument. Now, the thing about this pyramid is the lower you go on a pyramid, the harder it becomes to deal with each of those aspects. It's very easy to deal with rhetoric. It's fairly easy to deal with examples. It's moderately difficult to deal with analysis. And it's extremely hard to dispute an idea because more often than not, people's ideas make sense and their ideas have some reasoning behind them. So those are very hard to deal with. So you should look at this pyramid and prioritize your responses. If it's lower down on the pyramid, it has more impact, but it's harder to do. If it's higher up on the pyramid, it has less impact, but it's very easy to do. All right. Now that we've dealt with responses, that's pretty much it for the debating aspect of it. I'll go through some general guidelines. Again, these are common mistakes that people make. The first guideline is to listen to your teammates as well. Usually, everyone does a good job of listening to their opposition and dealing with the substantives brought out by the opposition. But what they don't do is they don't listen to their own teammates. So your teammate who goes before you could have a great new piece of rebuttal or new piece of rebuilding that you didn't really discuss during prep time, but you might have missed it because you weren't listening to your teammate and you were more focused on your speech. And that breaks the continuity within your team. Because if one teammate comes up with a really good argument, you want to make sure that that's continued down the bench and that every team member deals with it. The second idea is to ask yourself, how does a new concept affect your existing ideas? And this is again something that I see a lot when I judge debates. Teams make two arguments that sound great on their own, but if you put those arguments side by side, they contradict each other. And if your own arguments contradict themselves, that takes away from the credibility of your substantives. So that's something that you want to avoid all the time. The third thing that I want to mention is weighing. And weighing basically means putting your responses versus their substantives, or their responses versus your substantives on a scale, and showing why your content is more convincing than their content. Often what I see is teams will respond to an argument. They'll say, look, this substantive isn't true, here's what's true, and then they give out their response and then they move on. In the end, so as a judge, when I'm looking at this, it's basically your word against theirs, right? When it comes to that kind of response. What you need to do is you need to take the extra step and logically analyze for me why your response or your substantive is more convincing than what they said. So that's a key factor that you should pay attention to during the course of a debate. And that is pretty much it that I have for the debating fundamentals that I came up with. We can have some questions if anyone has any.
So I have one question, Gavin. I'm not sure whether I missed this particular part, but as you said in the beginning, we are kind of defining the meaning of the motion, right? So what if we are not, the two teams are not discussing beforehand? So what if two teams define it in a different way? So will the second speaker adjust it, or how will it go?
So if the two teams come up with different interpretations of the motion, I mean, one thing that is possible to be done is you can have a definitional challenge, and then the debate is conducted on whether or not it's basically conducted on whose definition is right. That's generally unadvisable because it doesn't make for a good debate. What you can do if you have two different interpretations of the motion is the second speakers can be understanding of it and try to accommodate both the interpretations if possible. Now, if the two ideas are so far apart that you absolutely cannot accommodate both ideas at the same time, then you have to go for a definitional challenge, unfortunate as it may be. Otherwise, either the second speakers can try to include the other side's interpretation of the motion as well, or they can like try and prove why their own interpretation is more justifiable than the other side's interpretation of the motion.
Thank you.
Yeah, Anusuya, I can see
Yeah,
that.
yeah, you just said that like the debate goes on to how the interpret like the both side interpret. I'm really sorry the pronunciation. So like as the debate progresses, if the if there is no definitional like fixation, as in like how the definition is going to go in terms of certain keywords which are really necessary for the motion, like doesn't it become very uh, like doesn't it become very messy? Because one part of the prop side, they go on to debating with their own definitions, and the other one they go on to define differently, and then the debate itself becomes really not in not within the standards of the motion itself, and there's a lot of deviation. So when that happens, how does judge, how does a judge judge or how do they like mark, or what's the standard of marking in that?
Um, Typically in debating, definitional challenges, quote unquote, are heavily discouraged. And the way that we discourage it is that, so debating tournaments generally happen across a lot of rounds. And if you lose a debate on a definitional challenge, you lose it on the largest possible margin, which really completely ruins your chances of getting into the quarterfinals or semifinals or whatever. So that's the way that in debating we make sure that definitional challenges don't usually happen. In the event that a definitional challenge does happen, and this is usually rare, most of the time teams can come to a compromise on the definition and move on from there onwards. If a definitional challenge does happen, the side that defends their definition better will obviously win the debate. And true, the debate becomes messy, but that is unavoidable. It's not necessarily something that you really need to worry about. It's fairly rare for definitional challenges to happen. What I wanted to highlight was that both teams should make sure that they, at the very least, have a definition, because one of the biggest causes of confusion in debates is that teams don't have a definition going into the debate to begin with. They just have their interpretation of the motion and the facts they found regarding the motion, and then everything just becomes a mess. If you have a definition in the first place, then at least you can, argue about it and sort it out in the second speeches at least. So that's why I wanted to highlight it. I don't think it's something that y'all should worry about so much.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions? And also could the organizers confirm if we have enough time, obviously.
I do have a question actually.
Yes.
Okay, I know. Like, I'm talking about our team. Okay, the theme is AI threat to creativity, and like and here the motions tells us to speak whether AI impacts human creativity, the way human creates different new things and all those things. Suppose in that particular motion, if I talk about some jobs being displaced by AI, some. Uh, Jobs that are now replaced by AI, and the people they get unemployed. So will that job statistics, or that like if I talk about this amount of jobs will be displaced by AI in coming future, will that job scenario resonate with the creativity, motion, like the motion of the debate is creativity, but if I talk about jobs being displaced, will that resonate? Is that good enough to include in the argument or not?
So typically, I don't know if I'm supposed to give you all any kind of content or advice on the specifics of the debate. So I don't know, the organizers can interrupt me, I guess, if that's an
No, no.
issue.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that will be uh,
No, okay.
since we have
I'll
both
just
team here.
Okay,
I'll change the scenario. I'll
I'll
change.
just give you a general response to it then, which is typically you want to make sure that every argument or every statistic or every idea that you present is relevant to the debate. So if you
Yeah.
want to address the issue of jobs and AI and all of that, try and find a way that you can link job loss to creativity and try to move on from there onwards. If you generally speak about, let's say, I don't know, cashiers or writers being replaced, or website marketing writers being replaced by AI, that's not really going to have an impact on creativity per se. Um, so try
Okay.
and make it relevant if you want to make such an argument.
Okay, no, actually, my intention was not to, talk about, but I think the most, feasible example was me. For me, was the same motion that was for the debate. So I'll just change the scenario. Suppose we have a topic, particular theme of the debate, and that maybe something, like let it be something ABCD. Let the theme of the debate be ABCD, and suppose that ABCD theme is somehow linked to a particular different scenario with some extension and with some deviations, then will that what to say, that both of them are, both of the arguments will resonate with each other, or not, or is it good to include that argument in that debate or not?
Right. Okay, I understand what you're saying. So what
Yeah,
you're saying is, if you have an idea that's of a different theme to the debate, but it's actually related to the debate in some form, you're
yeah,
asking me whether it's a good idea to introduce it anyway, and whether that would
yeah,
be
yeah,
yes.
yeah,
Okay. Typically, if you are introducing it, see, that's what I mentioned about the priority of your substantives. So the most important substantives, the top three, shouldn't be arguments like that. But your third or fourth speaker can have such a substantive, because if you have this many speakers, you have the freedom to introduce, these fun arguments or more philosophical arguments, or arguments of like slightly different themes. So you have the freedom to do that within this debate. But I don't think it will have a severe impact on the debate. I don't think such arguments will be, let's say, debate winning arguments, but definitely they can be included.
okay, thank you.
All right. Do we have time for any more questions?
If there are any questions, we can take the last question, I think. So I think there is no questions, so we're gonna wrap the session. So I just want to thank Gavin for such an amazing and informative presentation. Thank you for taking out the time to be here with us and share your tips and tricks. Surely, like your tips and tricks have been a great learning for us, and I am sure that the debaters are super duper excited and pumped up and recharged for the phase two Debractor. So thank you for joining in today. So just so now we have completed the training of like both the trainers. So now we are going to go ahead with the token of appreciation. So first, I would like to request to share the token of appreciation for our first trainer, that is Alpha Maya Shakya. So it's a form of small gratitude from our side to yours. Thank you for being here today with us. We really appreciate your time from such a busy schedule. Okay. So now we're going to go ahead with sharing the token of appreciation for Gavin. So thank you, Gavin, for taking out time from your busy schedule and like for addressing the questions and for giving us such an informative and insightful session in such a simple and like eloquent manner. So thank you so much. So now we have successfully completed the phase one Debractor session. So thank you all for being here today. So first, I just want to take the platform to appreciate the incredible Debractor OC team, the organizing committee team, Madhushika, Nezma, Lairu, Samali, Ilu, Diva, everyone. Like similarly, I would like to thank our president, Rotractor Ajay Yadav, and president of Rotract Club of Alumni, Mora Rotractor Lakshani Pathiragi, for always being the guiding light and always being the supportive system throughout. Similarly, thank you to our trainers, amazing trainers, Alpha Maya Shakya and Gavin, once again for taking out their time and also for sharing their tips and tricks. Like, it has been an incredible experience to learn from you all. Similarly, thank you to our amazing international service director, Diva Gimiri, and the international service directors of Road Track Club of Alumni Mora, Road Tractor Lahiru, Sampath, and Road Tractor Nisma Mithananda. Thank you so much for always guiding us throughout. And also, I would like to thank the incredible audience for being here with us in today's evening to learn together. You have been an incredible audience by asking questions throughout, for sticking around. So, thank you all. So, I think we're done with the session. Thank you all for joining. Goodbye. Good night.